I was never the favorite, not even close. I'm Devin, 31 now, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the odd one out in my family. Not in the edgy, misunderstood genius way or the black sheep who rebels against family traditions. No, I was just different, quiet, observant. I liked to read when my siblings liked to party. I asked questions instead of nodding along to whatever my parents said. I was soft-spoken when they were loud, thoughtful when they were impulsive. In a house full of people who thrived on drama and dominance, I was background noise. I grew up in a mid-sized town where everyone knew everyone, and reputation mattered more than truth. My parents, Linda and Ron, were well-liked in that performative, superficial way. You know the type. They smiled too hard in church, volunteered at school when it made them look good, and reminded us every week how hard they worked for this family. But behind closed doors, it was all hierarchy and comparison. My older brother Jake was the golden boy, varsity everything, charming, loud, and somehow always right. My younger sister Emily was the baby, the princess, the one who could do no wrong even when she absolutely did. And me? I was just Devin, the one they couldn't quite figure out how to fit into the picture. Too quiet, too strange, too into art or music or whatever it is he's doing in that room all day. I remember being 10 years old at Jake's birthday party. The whole backyard was decorated with banners, balloons, a rented karaoke machine, even one of those inflatable obstacle courses. People from his school showed up, some teachers, neighbors. I asked my mom if I could invite one friend from art class. She looked at me like I'd asked to bring a raccoon inside. "This is Jake's day," she said. "Let's not make it about you." That phrase became a sort of family motto. Let's not make it about you. I heard it when I asked why I didn't get a graduation dinner like Emily did. I heard it when I asked why they left me out of the Christmas family photo one year. "We thought you were busy." I heard it when I asked if I could share some of my sketches at the local craft fair they were all attending to support Emily's Etsy business. Every time I tried to carve out a small space for myself, I was told I was taking up too much room. It wasn't always cruel. That's what made it worse. It wasn't screaming or abuse or broken things. It was indifference. Lukewarm kindness that melted when you looked too closely. Smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Invitations that never came. I learned not to expect much. When I turned 18, I moved out. No drama, no big fight. Just quiet packing and a bus ticket to a state college 2 hours away. No one cried. Jake was too busy planning his fraternity's summer trip to Cabo. Emily didn't even say goodbye. My parents gave me a $50 gift card to Target and told me not to blow it all on snacks. I smiled, said thanks, and left. College wasn't glamorous, but it was the first time I felt like I could breathe. I studied graphic design and worked at a bookstore cafe where no one cared if I was quiet. I made friends, real ones, who liked me not because of what I could do for them, but because of who I was. I wasn't used to that. I kept waiting for the catch. It never came. And during that time, someone else entered my life again, my Uncle Ray. Uncle Ray was my dad's older brother. He was something of a recluse, the kind of man you hear vague stories about, but rarely see. He never came to family gatherings, never called on holidays. I barely remembered him from childhood, just flashes of a deep voice, long walks, and the smell of pipe tobacco. But when I was 20, he reached out. A letter. Not a text, not an email. A real letter, in a neat, old-fashioned script. He wrote that he'd heard I was in college now, that he'd always thought I had a quiet strength, and that if I ever wanted to visit him, I'd be welcome anytime. He lived 3 hours away in a big, old house near the coast. I went that weekend. That first visit was strange, but comforting. His house was like a museum, wall-to-wall books, strange sculptures, a grand piano with yellowed keys. He wasn't warm exactly, but he was kind. We talked about books, music, art. He never asked about my family, and I didn't bring them up. From that day on, I visited him once a month. Sometimes we'd go days without saying much, just drinking tea and reading. Other times we'd debate philosophy or watch classic films. He became family, the kind I never had. My actual family barely noticed. Or if they did, they never said anything. They had their own lives, weddings, babies, Instagram-perfect vacations. I was a footnote at best. I wasn't invited to Emily's wedding. Found out about it from a mutual friend who assumed I'd been there. Jake had 2 kids before I ever saw their faces. My parents moved to Florida without even telling me they were leaving. I got a postcard 2 weeks later that just said, "Settled in. Hope you're well." Still, a part of me kept hoping for something. A sign that I mattered. That I wasn't invisible. I sent birthday gifts. I commented on their posts. I answered when they did call, which wasn't often, and I kept my tone light, upbeat, like maybe that would make them like me more. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe if I just kept trying. But you can only knock on a closed door so many times before your knuckles start to bleed. The last time I saw my parents was during a family gathering 2 years ago. Uncle Ray had encouraged me to go, saying, "You might be surprised. People change." So I drove 6 hours to attend my mom's 60th birthday bash. The whole family was there. Jake, Emily, their kids, their spouses. Everyone buzzing around with champagne and catered appetizers, laughing in little clusters. I walked in and got one of those awkward half hugs from my mom. "Oh wow," she said, looking genuinely surprised. "You actually came." Jake gave me a nod and went back to telling a story about his new car. Emily didn't even make eye contact. I tried to talk to a few people, but every conversation died in under a minute. I stood alone in the corner for most of the night, nursing a drink and pretending to look at photos on the wall. At one point, I overheard Emily telling someone, "Oh, that's Devin. He's like the artsy one, I guess. Kinda does his own thing." I left after 2 hours. No one noticed. Except Uncle Ray. When I got back to his house, he was waiting on the porch with a mug of tea and his signature dry smile. "So," he said, "family reunion go well?" I just laughed. And for once, it wasn't bitter. He didn't say much else. Just patted the chair beside him and handed me the tea. A year later, he was gone. And that's when everything started to change. But not in the way they expected. Not even close. The news of Uncle Ray's passing didn't come from a phone call or a family group chat. Because, of course, I wasn't on one. It came from a letter, just like the first time he reached out to me all those years ago. His lawyer, a man named Franklin Pierce, I swear, the most old-timey name I've ever heard, sent a handwritten note on thick stationery. It reads simply, "Devin, I am sorry to inform you that your uncle, Raymond Caldwell, passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 nights ago. He spoke of you often and fondly. His final wishes were clear. Please contact my office at your earliest convenience. F. Pierce." The moment I finished reading, I sat frozen in my chair. The grief hit me not like a tidal wave, but like a slow, cold flood. Uncle Ray had been more than family. He'd been a lighthouse, quietly anchoring me through years of quiet rejection. Losing him felt like losing the one person who had ever seen me fully and still wanted me around. I sat with that for a long time before calling Mr. Pierce. A week later, I was back in that familiar coastal town, standing in the echoing foyer of Ray's house. Only now everything felt hollow. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light, and the grandfather clock that used to chime every hour stood eerily silent. Franklin Pierce met me in the parlor, a dignified man with tired eyes and a deep, solemn voice. He explained that Uncle Ray had put everything in order months before his death. There would be a will reading, but it wasn't for the family. It was for me. I remember blinking at him. "Wait, just me." He nodded. "Your uncle made it clear. You were his only visitor, his only friend, and in the last few years, the only family that mattered." That moment still feels like something out of a dream, equal parts surreal and heartbreaking. What followed was even more unbelievable. Uncle Ray had left me everything. Not just the house. Not just the vintage car in the garage or the art collection hanging in his study. No, I inherited his entire estate. Multiple properties, an investment portfolio, rare book collections, and, most shocking of all, ownership of several apartment complexes and commercial buildings he'd quietly managed through a trust. The man had been sitting on a fortune north of $8 million. And now it was mine. Franklin explained it all carefully. I had to sign some papers, meet with a financial advisor, and agree to maintain the historical nature of the Caldwell estate. But aside from that, no strings attached. Ray had chosen me as his sole beneficiary. Not my dad. Not my siblings. Me. It didn't take long for the vultures to circle. The first message came from Jake. A casual, "Hey bro, heard about Uncle Ray. Crazy, huh? We should catch up soon." I didn't respond. Then Emily chimed in, texting me for the first time in over a year. "Hey Dev, really sorry to hear about Uncle Ray. He was such a cool guy. I remember visiting him as a kid. He gave me a toy horse once. Hope you're doing okay. Let's talk soon." I stared at that message for a long time. I knew for a fact she had never visited him. She once called him creepy at a Thanksgiving dinner I wasn't invited to. She was 13 at the time. I was 19. I only knew about the comment because Uncle Ray told me, amused, not hurt. But the real storm hit when my parents found out. It started with a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Then another. Then a text from my dad, all caps. Devin, call US now. This is important. I ignored it. 2 days later, I received an email from my mother. The subject line, let's talk. Devin, we've just learned about Ray's will. This is a lot to process. We understand that you were close with him, and we're happy he had you during his final years. However, it's hard not to feel hurt that the rest of the family wasn't included. Your father especially is taking it hard. Ray was his brother, after all. We'd like to meet and discuss what's fair. We're not asking for everything, just something to help the rest of the family. After all, family is everything. Love, Mom. I read it 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and laughed. Not the happy kind. The kind that comes out when you've been gaslit for so long that the absurdity of it all finally reaches the surface. Fair. This was the same woman who once told me I'd probably never succeed in life because I lacked social skills. The same woman who couldn't be bothered to call when I graduated or ask how I was paying rent during college. And now that I had something, now that I was no longer the forgettable, awkward middle child, I was worth reconnecting with, I didn't reply. A week later, things escalated. My dad showed up at the house. I was in the garden, trying to decide whether to pull out the overgrown lavender bush, when I heard the tires crunching down the gravel driveway. I turned and saw his familiar silhouette step out of a rental car. Gray hair now, slight limp, but the same stiff jaw and commanding stride. He didn't even wait for an invitation. Devin, he said, walking up like this was his home. Glad you're here. I stood still. This is my house. Of course I'm here. He gave me a strained smile, the kind that people wear to funerals. Look, I'll get right to it. Your mother's worried sick. Emily's business is struggling. Jake just got laid off. I know things haven't been perfect between us, but we're family. And family takes care of each other. The audacity of it all stunned me. I didn't say anything. He kept going. You've got all this now, this house, the money. You don't need it all. But we could really use a little help. Just a portion. We're not asking for handouts. That's exactly what you're asking for, I said flatly. He blinked. Excuse me. You want money. From me. After ignoring me for 15 years. After acting like I was some sort of inconvenience to the family. My father's expression hardened. That's not fair, Devin. I tilted my head. Isn't it? He let out a sigh, like I was the unreasonable one. We didn't exclude you. You chose to be different. You isolated yourself. There it was. The classic gaslight maneuver. The twist. You did this to yourself. Ray didn't think so, I said. That made him flinch. He stayed for another 10 minutes, trying different angles, guilt, nostalgia, even a thinly veiled thread about how it wouldn't look good for me to hoard wealth while my family struggled. I walked him to the driveway and shut the gate behind him without another word. The voicemails came in waves after that. Some from my mom, tearful. Others from Emily, laced with guilt trips and fake cheer. Jake left the most. Usually late-night rants about how I was letting money change me and proving everyone right about how selfish I was. Then came the group message. They made a new chat and added me to it. The title was Caldwell Family Reconnect. The first message was a picture of Jake's kids with the caption, "They miss their Uncle Devin." I removed myself from the chat immediately. And still, the flood kept coming. I started getting DMs from extended family members I hadn't seen since high school. One of my cousins messaged me on Facebook saying he was proud of me for inheriting the Caldwell legacy and asked if I could help fund his music label. A second cousin tried to add me on LinkedIn, then followed up with a sob story about student loans and needing a co-signer. It was surreal, like I had become a slot machine with legs. They didn't want me. They wanted what I had. But nothing prepared me for what Emily did next. It was subtle at first. She started tagging me in old photos on Instagram, family trips, childhood birthdays, holidays where I was barely visible in the background. The captions were things like, "Miss those days," or "Family is forever, even if we drift apart." Then she wrote a post about Uncle Ray, a glowing tribute. She talked about how he'd inspired her artistic journey and how they used to walk on the beach and talk about life. She ended it with a line that made me physically recoil. I wish I had visited more. I hope he knows how much I loved him. I miss you every day, Uncle Ray. She had never visited him. Not once. And that's when I realized they weren't just begging now. They were rewriting history, trying to craft a version of events where they were the loving, devoted family, and I was the bitter one hoarding the inheritance. They were trying to take what wasn't theirs, again, not through legal means, but through emotional manipulation, public perception, and guilt. And for the first time in my life, I felt something different. Not sadness, not anger, clarity. They had always seen me as a spare part, a silent witness to their golden child show. And now that I had something valuable, they wanted to rewrite the script. But this time, I was the one holding the pen, and I was done being edited out of the picture. I didn't go outside for 3 days after Emily posted that tribute. I told myself I was just busy. Too many calls with Uncle Ray's accountant, too much paperwork with the estate lawyer, too many moving parts to handle at once. But the truth was simpler. I didn't want to face the world. I couldn't. Not after seeing my sister's face in that filtered photo, fake tears in her eyes, captioning a lie so well-crafted it had people commenting things like, "So sorry for your loss," and "Your uncle sounded like a wonderful man." She was getting sympathy for grief she never earned. It broke something in me. For a while, I just sat in the study, the one with the heavy velvet curtains and the tall windows that faced the sea. That was Ray's favorite room. I could almost still smell his pipe tobacco clinging to the wood, still see the stack of poetry books on the corner table. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just stared at the rain crawling down the window and felt hollow. What hurt the most wasn't losing him. It wasn't even the sudden inheritance or the flood of fake affection that came after. It was the realization that I had been holding out hope this entire time. That somewhere deep inside me, I still believed they might change. That one day I'd walk into a room and be seen, not as a burden or a background character, but as Devin, as me. And now that hope was gone. And losing hope, that's a different kind of rock bottom. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It tells you maybe you were the problem. Maybe the cold shoulders and forgotten birthdays were your fault all along. Maybe you are selfish for keeping what Ray left you. Maybe family is everything, and you're just too broken to see it. For 3 days, I wrestled with those thoughts. I didn't eat much. I didn't answer texts. I let the house go quiet, like it had before I ever moved in. But rock bottom has a funny way of showing you what matters. On the 4th morning, I woke up to find the sun cutting across the floor in warm, golden lines. I brewed coffee, strong, black, and took it out to the porch. The sea looked alive again, not gray and cold but bright and chaotic, waves crashing against the rocks like they had something to prove. I sat in Ray's chair, the one with the squeaky armrest, and for the first time since the funeral, I let myself remember him fully. He was never a loud man, never pushed advice on me, but he saw things. One of the last things he ever said to me was during a quiet evening on the back porch, not long after my 29th birthday. "You spend too much time waiting for people to understand you," he said, sipping his tea. "But the ones who do, they won't need convincing." At the time, I thought he was just being philosophical. But now, I understood. He didn't just leave me money. He left me a choice. And I was done waiting. That week, I started making changes. First, I turned off the flood of notifications. I muted all family members on social media. I changed my number. Only gave the new one to 2 close friends and my lawyer. The silence that followed was deafening at first, but then it was peaceful. Like cleaning out a cluttered room you didn't realize was suffocating you. Then I walked through the Caldwell estate. Not like a guest, not like an imposter, but like an owner. I made a list of what needed repairs, what needed to go, and what I wanted to preserve. Ray's study stayed untouched, of course. But the rest? It was mine now. And I wanted to make it feel like me, not just a monument to his solitude. I hired a local contractor to help with renovations, small things at first. Fixing the kitchen, repainting the faded walls, replacing broken floor tiles in the upstairs bathroom. His name was Cole, and he was quiet like me. We'd work for hours without speaking, occasionally nodding at each other in agreement about some repair. It was the most comfortable silence I'd ever experienced. He introduced me to a few people in town, bookstore owners, artists, cafe regulars. Not big parties or anything like that. Just casual, warm connections. People who didn't know or care who my family was, or how much money I'd inherited. They just knew me as Devin, the guy fixing up the old Caldwell place. And for once, That was enough. The rebuilding wasn't just physical. I started drawing again. It had been years since I'd touched a sketchbook, college, maybe. But one night, after dinner, I pulled out an old pad from Ray's office. It was dusty, half-used, the cover curled at the edges. I didn't overthink it. I just started sketching the view from the back window, the ocean framed by pine trees, the garden below still wild with winter's leftovers. My hand was shaky at first, but the muscle memory returned. Line by line, the image took shape. And then I kept going. Every morning, every evening. Sketches turned into digital renderings. Digital turned into mock-ups. Soon I found myself building a small portfolio again. Not because I needed money, I didn't, but because it felt good to make something. One day, I visited the town's little art co-op, just to look around. I mentioned to the woman behind the counter that I'd been sketching again, and she asked to see. I hesitated, but something in her smile reminded me of Ray's quiet confidence. So I showed her. A week later, she offered me a spot in the summer showcase. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the sky shift from orange to purple, and I realized something. I wasn't lonely. I missed Ray, yes, deeply, but I wasn't alone. Not anymore. I had carved out a life here. One built not on obligation or guilt, but on choice, on peace. And that's when I understood the true value of what Ray had left me. Not the money, the freedom, but as my life was blooming in the quiet corners of this coastal town, something else was stirring in the background, like a shadow just out of view. It started with a voicemail from my old college friend, Marissa. Hey, Dev, you doing okay? I saw something weird. Emily posted a GoFundMe. Says your parents are at risk of losing their house. That you won't help them? It's intense. Just wanted to check on you. My stomach twisted. I hadn't been online in weeks. I opened my laptop and searched her name. Sure enough, there it was. A full-blown public campaign. Photos of my parents' Florida home with captions like medical bills piling up, Devin refuses to help, and please donate to keep this family afloat. The post was filled with guilt-tripping language. After everything we've done for him, our son has turned his back on us in our hour of need. We're not asking for luxury, just a chance to keep the lights on. Hundreds of shares, dozens of comments, people donating, friends from my hometown chiming in with "so sorry to hear this, Linda," and "can't believe your own son would do this." And there it was. They were painting me as the villain. No, not just the villain. The ungrateful son who abandoned his sick parents. And something in me snapped. Not in an angry way, in a clear way. They had spent my entire life pretending I didn't exist. When I finally had something, they came running, not with kindness, but with expectation. And now that I wouldn't bend, they were trying to shame me into submission. They still thought they could control the narrative. But they didn't know who I had become. Not yet. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. I wasn't planning on serving anything at all, not at first. The GoFundMe stunt made my blood boil, sure. But I wasn't interested in sinking to their level. I'd spent years avoiding drama, keeping my head down, and trying to be the bigger person. That was the version of me they were familiar with. The one who didn't fight back. The one who'd just disappear when things got tense. But this time something had shifted. This wasn't just a cry for help or a misguided guilt trip. This was character assassination. Public. Deliberate. They weren't just knocking on my door anymore. They were trying to drag my name through the mud because I refused to give them what they thought they were entitled to. So, for the first time in my life, I decided to stop playing defense. It was time to build something of my own, not just a quiet life, not just a home, a plan. And the best part? I didn't need to fabricate anything. I had truth on my side. It started with a document I found in Ray's old office while I was looking for some old property keys. Tucked between the pages of a 1950s first edition of The Old Man and the Sea was a manila folder. Nothing fancy, no label, just old papers and some curled-up photographs. But inside was gold. Medical reports, bills, letters, all documenting every time Uncle Ray had reached out to my father over the past 15 years. And every time he was ignored. One letter in particular stood out, a handwritten note from Ray to my dad, dated 7 years ago, shortly after Ray had been diagnosed with the early stages of heart disease. It read, "Ron, I don't need money or attention, just company. I'd like to see you again before I go. You're my brother, after all. Ray." I stared at that line for a long time. My father never mentioned this. He never visited, never called. And yet, They were now acting as if Ray's estate had been cruelly snatched from them by a greedy nephew. It was all the fuel I needed. So I started making copies. Everything. The letters, the emails, the financial reports showing Ray paying my father's debts years ago, debts never repaid. Photos of me visiting him over the years, birthdays we'd spent together, drawings I'd gifted him that still hung on his walls. But I didn't post them. Not yet. I was going to be precise. That same week, I met with Mr. Franklin Pierce again, Ray's lawyer. I told him about the GoFundMe and the slander. His reaction was immediate. That's defamation, he said calmly, fingers steepled. Especially if it implies you were responsible for financial neglect that never occurred. And especially given you have evidence to the contrary. Can we do anything? I asked. We can do better, he replied, sliding a packet across the table. I think it's time we talk about what your uncle actually left you. I thought I'd already heard it all. The estate, the properties, the money. But Ray had been meticulous. Turns out, the apartment complexes he owned weren't just rental properties. They were managed under a non-profit housing organization Ray had founded quietly a decade ago, one that provided reduced rent to veterans, artists, and the elderly. It was his way of giving back without drawing attention to himself. And now I was the chairman. There was an upcoming board meeting, the first since his death, and my signature was needed to continue funding several community programs, including art scholarships and a coastal preservation project. Suddenly, I had more than just a fortune. I had a platform, influence, and a reputation to protect, not just for me, but for the people Ray cared about. That's when it clicked. They had tried to tear me down in public? Fine, let's play in public. I reached out to the local newspaper, just a small one, the kind that still ran physical copies and had a column for community leaders. I didn't pitch them a scandal. I pitched them a tribute. New owner of Caldwell Estate continues legacy of quiet philanthropy. The piece ran with a photo of me in Ray's study, surrounded by his books. I talked about the nonprofit, the importance of preserving the house, and honoring my uncle's memory by giving back to the town that gave him peace. No drama, no bitterness, just dignity. But I wasn't done. I created a personal website, simple, clean, featuring Ray's legacy projects, the nonprofit's initiatives, and a few stories from my time with him. I included photos of us together, some of his handwritten notes, even a short video of him playing piano while I sketched. I called it Ray's Light. It started gaining traction quickly, especially after the newspaper piece linked to it. And then, finally, I addressed the GoFundMe. Not by name, not by direct reference, but in a blog post titled, "When Family Doesn't Feel Like Family." I wrote about growing up as an afterthought, about what it's like to be ignored for decades, only to be remembered when you inherit something of value. I talked about Ray, not just the money, but the man, how he listened, how he saw me, how he taught me that family isn't always blood, it's choice. I didn't mention Jake or Emily. I didn't need to. Anyone who knew me, or them, could read between the lines. The post went viral within the community. Then it spread further. Artists I'd connected with shared it. Veterans who lived in Ray's buildings commented with their own memories. Strangers emailed to say it made them feel less alone. And here's where things got poetic. Because while I was quietly building a new life, one based on respect, memory, and truth, my family was unraveling. Emily's Etsy business? She had started using the GoFundMe funds to prop it up. A few people who donated began asking questions. When one woman commented, "Isn't this the sister who never visited her uncle?" Emily deleted her entire comment history. Jake? He tried starting a podcast called Family First, a cringe fest about reconnecting with loved ones and forgiving old wounds. But clips of him ranting surfaced, contradicting his message, and the whole thing crashed within a month. My parents? They tried to sue. Not for the estate. They had no grounds. But for emotional distress caused by my refusal to share inheritance funds. Their lawyer sent a demand letter to Franklin. Franklin responded by forwarding a 12-page packet of documentation showing years of neglect, financial abuse, and Ray's very clear intentions in the will. They dropped it 2 weeks later. The final nail in the coffin came when I received an invitation to speak at the local university about legacy, art, and quiet impact. It wasn't a TED Talk or anything, just a small panel. But it mattered, because on that stage, I said something I'd never had the courage to say before. My uncle didn't leave me his estate because I was lucky. He left it to me because I showed up. Over and over, with no expectation of reward. Love isn't a transaction. Neither is family. And afterward, an older man in the crowd came up to me, eyes misty. Ray helped me get back on my feet after I lost my job, he said. He always said you were his real son. I can see why. I went home that night and stood on the porch again, just like Ray used to. I could still hear the ocean. The wind was colder now, but I didn't mind. I'd spent a lifetime waiting to be chosen. Now, I'd chosen myself. But the story isn't over yet. Because I haven't told you what I did with the estate. And I haven't told you what happened when the family tried one last time, one final, desperate move, to take it from me. That's where things get messy. By the time they tried their final move, I had already laid the foundation. For months, they'd attempted everything. Emotional manipulation, social pressure, even legal threats. And when all that failed, they turned to the one thing they thought they still had, public sympathy. Emily uploaded a video. It started as a shaky shot of her in her kitchen, no makeup, soft lighting, sad music in the background. She looked into the camera with that same rehearsed vulnerability she used in every Instagram story about her journey as a small business owner. She called it, "When Family Hurts You the Most." I didn't want to make this, she said, sighing heavily. But I feel like I have to speak my truth. My brother Devin, he's changed. After inheriting our uncle's estate, he cut us off. All of us. No calls. No help. And now our parents are losing their home, and he's refusing to lift a finger. It's like he's punishing us. And I just can't stay silent anymore. The video was laced with teary half-truths and outright lies. She painted herself and our parents as victims. She even brought up my childhood, saying she tried to connect with me, but that I always pushed everyone away. She used old photos of us as kids, spliced in with music designed to make anyone watching feel like she was the heartbroken sister of a cold-hearted millionaire. It worked. At first, the video went viral. Nothing huge, but enough. People started messaging me again. Anonymous comments flooded my personal site. A few news blogs picked up the story, spinning it into the millionaire who let his parents go bankrupt. For a moment, I felt like I was being pulled back under. Like no matter what I did, they would always own the narrative. But I had been preparing. I didn't just have receipts. I had witnesses. When Ray passed, I hadn't immediately told people in town everything about my family. But over the past year, I'd grown close with several locals who'd known Ray far longer than I had. His doctor, his housekeeper, his neighbor who used to bring him soup every Tuesday. All of them knew what really went down. Ray's doctor, in particular, had once told me in confidence that he was deeply saddened by how Ray's brother ignored his declining health. The man had written letters, made calls, all unanswered. The only person who showed up, consistently, was me. So I called them, one by one. I explained what was happening. I didn't ask for anything dramatic, just the truth. And they delivered. The housekeeper wrote a post about how, in the 10 years she worked for Ray, Devin was the only family member I ever saw at the house. Every month, rain or shine. The neighbor posted pictures of me helping Ray in the garden, helping fix a broken pipe, bringing groceries. She captioned it, "Don't believe everything you see on the internet." Devin was there. The rest were not. The doctor? He posted a letter, carefully worded, HIPAA safe, saying that the public narrative being circulated by certain individuals directly contradicts the documented truth of who supported Mr. Raymond Caldwell in his final years. And then I released the big one. I uploaded a video of my own. It wasn't flashy. Just me, in Ray's study, sitting by the fire. No sad music. No filters. No edits. I titled it, "The Truth About My Family." I started calmly. "I never wanted to speak publicly about this," I said. "But I'm being forced to defend myself against people who've decided to rewrite the past to suit their needs." Then I laid it out, fact by fact. I showed Ray's will. I shared excerpts of letters he wrote to my father, asking to reconnect, and the lack of response. I posted photos of me and Ray from over the years, birthdays, holidays, quiet weekends. I explained what the estate had funded since: art programs, veterans housing, coastal cleanup, student grants. I showed the public exactly where my money was going, and it wasn't to yachts or cars or personal indulgence. Finally, I ended with this. My family ignored me for 15 years. I was too different, too quiet, too inconvenient. That's fine. But when Uncle Ray, who they abandoned, left me everything, they decided I owed them. Not love, not forgiveness, but money. And when I refused, they lied. To you. To everyone. So this is the truth. Take it or leave it. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't insult anyone. I just told the truth. And that's what destroyed them. The comments under Emily's video turned fast. You said you visited Ray. Why do his neighbors say otherwise? Why didn't your parents respond to his letters? Your brother's video is pure class. You should be ashamed. People began pulling their donations from the GoFundMe. Some even asked for refunds. Others started reporting it for fraud. Eventually, the page was taken down entirely. Jake went radio silent. His podcast disappeared. His Facebook went dark. Emily tried one more desperate move. She claimed I had doctored the letters, that the neighbors were lying for clout, that the video of Ray playing piano with me was edited. But no one bought it. Not anymore. Then came the final fallout. A reporter from a larger outlet reached out to me. She wanted to do a feature, not on the drama, but on Ray's legacy. She'd seen the local stories. She'd watched the video. She wanted to highlight Ray's Light, the nonprofit, and how I was using the inheritance to help the community. I agreed. The article dropped a week later. Front page of their weekend edition. Title: The Nephew Who Showed Up. How One Quiet Artist is Honoring a Forgotten Legacy. They printed a photo of me standing in front of the house, one hand on the old stone railing Ray used to lean on. The story mentioned the accusations from my family, but only to contrast them against the overwhelming evidence of who Ray had really been close to and who had been missing. And just like that, the narrative was out of their hands. Forever. I heard through a mutual friend that my parents had to sell their Florida home. They moved into a small rental outside Tampa. My father was humiliated by the entire ordeal. My mother still told people she didn't understand why Devin hates us. They never apologized. Not once. Emily's online store tanked. Reviews flooded in calling her dishonest, entitled, manipulative. Her influencer deals dried up. She tried pivoting to a healing journey blog, but no one was listening anymore. Jake eventually got another job, I think. Corporate sales or something. He never reached out again. And me? I kept going. The nonprofit grew. We opened a new scholarship in Ray's name. I hosted a local art show featuring students from the town's high school. I spoke at another university. I started sketching again, full-time. Even published a collection of drawings called Quiet Rooms, inspired by moments in the house with Ray. I met someone too. A librarian named Nora. Smart. Calm. She read the article and wrote me an email that started with, "Your uncle would be proud. Also, your handwriting in that blog post is surprisingly neat." We had coffee. Then more coffee. Now she helps run Ray's Light with me. But more than anything, I finally feel at peace. I walk through this house, and it's not filled with ghosts or guilt anymore. It's filled with purpose, with legacy, with quiet strength, the kind Ray always saw in me. And when I sit on the porch at night, glass of wine in hand, watching the sun set over the sea, I sometimes imagine Ray beside me. No words, just that knowing look. We did it right. We did it our way. They erased me from the family for 15 years. Now I've erased them from the story entirely.